lab number 270. Let's start with opening our studio. In this lab series, as you remember, we are using Visual Studio Code. Let's also launch the server, launch the mock server, and so on, arrange the windows to prepare our machine for work just as it was before. So firstly, we are going to our dev folder, and then server, and then starting the server using run command. Then we also need to navigate to our dev workspaces, then our AdvancedMessenger folder, and to our client-side application, which is called the same way, AdvancedMessenger. And from this folder, we will launch it on device emulator. So we will need to start emulator first. Let's type Android AVD to launch Android Virtual Device Manager. From there, we can start our emulator, scale it to fit the display size. In parallel, another tab, we can navigate to our mock server and start the mock server using command node, then server.js. So our mock server is running. Next step for us will be to launch Gulp Watch from dev workspaces, then our client-side application. So this will watch for our changes in app folder and build a client-side for us. And finally, we will need to launch the app on our device to see that it's still working. So that can be done using CDV Live. We will launch the Live Reload server, and then the name of the platform. In our case, it will be Android. Let's rename the tabs. So this one will be Gulp. This one will be Mock. This is our emulator. And finally, this is the server. Just like that. So in the meanwhile, our app is building and starting. We can open our browser, navigate to Chrome, inspect devices. So when the app will be started, we will be able to actually debug the app. So as you can see, it should be in a second. Okay, the app is here. So we are inside, and we are seeing that our application is still working. So the moment that we stopped previously was on our schedule provider. This was the only provider that was still calling the things directly. So firstly, we were calling the schedule to get this list of destinations. And then we should directly call Google API. But in our particular case, we just commented that out in schedule TS file right here, because when we were using the CDV Live, those calls were impossible due to cross-region request. So now what we will do, we will change this provider, and what we will try to achieve is we will try to achieve to make the call to this mock server directly, but this time using WL resource request, so using MobileFirst Platform API. And on that side, I mean on mock server, we will try to implement interceptor that will actually check whether we have required access, meaning a required token to access this data. So we'll try to secure that remote external resource using our scope called restricted data, as you remember. So there will be several steps that we need to do for that, but we will start with opening our browser, and let's make it bigger. And navigating to our tutorials or docs. So we are interested in Authentication and Security section, and from there to Protecting External Resources page. So this one explains general view of how to do it, how to protect external resources using our authorization server, and there are 4 different options provided here. You can write your own interceptor if you want, but we will follow the Node.js validator tutorial. And what we need to do before is we need to create the confidential client with some secret, which also can be mapped to password, with the authorization introspect scope to access it through our Node Mock Server. So for that, we need to go to our console, and that one is sitting on localhost 9080, as you remember, then MFP console. The username and the password is still standard one, admin, admin. And from there, we need to navigate to runtime settings, confidential clients, and create new confidential client. Let's call it something like Mock Server. ID will be the same. And then for secret, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Basically, you can set anything, and this can be like any data for ID and secret as you wish. What is important here is the allowed scope. This should be authorization introspect. So let's add that one and click Save. Okay, so now when we've done this, we can actually close our console and navigate back to our tutorial to Node.js validator. So instruction is pretty clear, and there are a few simple steps. So first, we need to start with installing a new module or new package for Node, and that can be done from our command line interface. So let's go to our terminal, navigate to Mock tab. We will close the Mock server for now. We will implement this. We will install this Passport MFP token validation by just copy-pasting that line and wait until it will finish. And afterwards, you see that we need to load it. So we will copy those 2 lines. Express is already there. Opening our Mock server, so it is located under Mock server folder. We need to open server.js. And from there on the top, right here after pass, for example, let's pass those 2 lines. We don't need var here. And there should be comma at the end. Just like that. So this is the first step. Then we need to set the params for our passport. We can copy this test strategy and pass it somewhere here. So what do we need to change? Basically, our server URL is still remaining the same. So we have localhost 9080, MFP is the default runtime name. We have different confidential clients. So as you remember, it's Mock server. And password or secret is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then if you want, we can leave this analytics thing. If you don't want, you can remove analytics thing, but analytics is used to log events for MobileFirst Foundation. And basically, the URL for us remaining the same for now. So next thing that we need to do is we will need to initialize Passport using the line like this, app use passport initialize. And we can do it, for example, somewhere here. And finally, when we will call the specific API, what we need to do is to say passport authenticate, then MobileFirst strategy, and then specify session and scope. So that should be right before the function with request and response. So let's try this on our shadow, somewhere here, right before our function request and response. So scope was restricted data for us. As you remember, let's check in our console. So our application for Android, security tab, yes, scope was this restricted data. And this is how we will secure that API. So we can save this server.js and try to launch our mock server using the same command, node server.js. And now we can try to access this API. So we can access it by going to shadow, even through the web browser. So localhost 4567 is the port, and then shadow. So what we got is unauthorized. This is expected because we didn't pass the authorization for that specific scope. Now we will try to call that one properly using the client-side, our client-side application. So for that, let's go to our AdvancedMessenger and navigate to our shadow provider. And what we need to do is basically replace this load function, or at least part of the load function, with this call using HTTP GET. We can take as an example, for example, employee provider, where we perform that call properly. So this was the way to do it using the WL resource request. So we can copy this one and pass it inside our shadow provider, replacing everything that we have here for a promise. Just like that. So instead of calling the adapter, we will now call directly that shadow service. So the URL will be the old one, direct URL. So it should be our IP address. So check if your IP address was changed. This is really important to make sure that you type in the correct one. You can check IP address by opening the terminal tab and typing the following as bin fconfig, and somewhere there will be your IP address for Ethernet 0. So this is particularly what you need to copy. Make sure you checked that it's working, like replacing the local host with that one. Yes. Then copy the address, and you can pass it here to WL resource request. We can leave the method get, and what will be our result is just delivery instead of our results that we expected in employee provider. So delivery, just like that. So now we can save this shadow provider TS and wait for our update on the client-side application. So enter equal username and password. I will use D with uppercase for both options, and yep, we got the data. So for our mock server, we see that shadow service was called and everything is fine. And in previous call that was made through the browser, we see the warning that scopes are not contained in granted scope. So that is how we received that unauthorized. So basically, that's all for load function. And now it's time to fix the calculation, meaning the destinations function. So what we will do here will be similar to what we did in our load function. So we basically can copy a promise from there and pass somewhere here. So this is the closing of our promise. So let me pass it here and comment the initial one, and we will copy the prompt step by step. So first thing that we will copy is the proper URL. So instead of calling the shadow, we will call that distance, for example. So that API that we will need to create on mock server will be called distance. Then we will create basically request, and we will need to add prompts to that request. So previously we were constructing the prompts in the following way, and we will copy that part of the code and uncomment it. So the way how we were doing it is we were getting the current time using date now, then taking the origin destination using the hard-coded values, because we don't have any GPS access for now. And then we were constructing the Google prompts. So what we will need to do instead, we will need to set the query prompts for our resource request using our API. So data request, then set query parameter, and then we need to provide two things. First is the parameter name and then the value. So let's start with the origins like it was here in Google Prom. So origins will be equal to our origin that we defined here. So this is the first, and we can copy that set query param line multiple times, actually 4 times will be needed. So the second one will be destinations, the third one will be departure time, and the last one will be traffic model. So let's start with traffic model, because that one is also hard-coded value best guess. So instead of origin, we'll just put here best guess. So departure time is equal to current time, and destinations equal to destinations right here. So we can still have this Google prompts variable here just to have the logging. So let's add console debug just to see that we still have those prompts and what values we are sending. So like Google params and then Google params, just like that. So we set the queries, and now we need to manage the response, and same way like we were doing it before. So before we had this distance equal to distance, and then we were doing a debug of what we received. So we will do now similar thing. So we will start with mapping this distance to our response JSON. We don't need this data anymore, and resolving of that data. So here it will be response JSON, just like that. Then we will have the same things remaining. So we will see the shuttle count data using this distance rows 0 elements, and then we will resolve those. So everything else just remain as is. So no other changes needed here. We can simply remove the upper part that we commented out to copy values and save this shadow provider. So for now it won't be working because nobody called it. We didn't uncomment it in our shadow TS file previously, and we won't do it for now, because what we need to do is we need to take those and actually implement proper API on our mock server. So for that we need to go to our mock server and then server.js again, and the same thing that we had for shadow we will do, almost the same thing we will do for our second service that we just called distance, as you remember, right here. So this one will be a bit different, mainly because we will need to call Google API from here. So we'll use request for that, but it will be later on. Let's firstly deal with request that came to us here. So we'll start with logging. So instead of logging that shadow service was called, we will say that distance service was called. Then we don't need this resolve of objects. There is no JSON that we will just resolve. We will implement the normal call, and we will need to have some variables, and we will start with hard-coded one for Google URL, and this will be the URL of our Google APIs. So it should be hard-coded like it was before. And the proper URL is maps googleapis.com, then port 443, then maps API distance matrix, and finally JSON. So this is the URL that we are going to call to actually receive the answer for us. For proper location and timings, just make sure you are not doing the typos like I just did. So maps googleapis.com, then 443 is the port, then maps, then API, and then distance matrix, and finally JSON. So this was the first. Next thing we just need to get for a query parameters that was set for request when actually client side will call us. So we will need to get all of that. So we will start with origins, and we can get those parameters, those query parameters, using request, then query, and then providing the name of our parameter. So we start with this origins, and the name is actually the same. The next step, we can just copy this multiple times, and as you remember, the proper number is 4 times. Because we are talking about exactly the same params. So the second one was destinations. Next one was departure time. And finally, there was a traffic model with underscore. Just like that. Now we can construct the pass that needs to be called, and that one will consist of our Google URL plus origins. That should be our taken origins. Then there should be destinations equal to our destinations. Next thing was, and of course it's not the question, it's @. Next thing was departure time equal to our departure time. And finally, there was our traffic model. Let me do the word wrap so it will be a bit easier. Traffic model equal to our traffic model, just like that. Let me do some logging here so we will see it. Something like requested pass, and then our pass, like that. So we will use request client, which is pretty small and useful. We will need to kind of load it first. So just like request require and the name is basically the same, request, just like that. And down there, what we will need to do is we will need to construct that request, and the construction is pretty easy. So what we need to pass inside is the options. We need to configure some options. There should be the URL that we are going to call in method at least. Then we will have a couple of callbacks, meaning there will be a callback and several parameters that we will receive. Basically, one will be enough for us, but let's go with 3 params inside. So error, response is our full response, and finally the body. Body is our response text inside the body. And what we will do inside is we will just check if there is any error, and if there is an error, we will construct a manual response. If there is no error, we will just response the whole body, but we will need to do a parsing first because we will receive this as a string and we will need to parse and response as a JSON. So let's first check if there are no errors. That can be done by checking if there is an error. And also we need to check that our response status code will be equal to 200, which means everything is okay. So if those conditions are true, then we can simply reply with our JSON body inside, and as I said, we need to parse it first. So JSON parse, and finally our body as an input. If everything goes wrong, then we basically will respond with the manually constructed reply. Let's go with something like status, and here we will have our response status code, and let's go also with error. So here we will reply with the error itself, and finally we can also provide full response just to diagnose what happened, and just put response here. So just like that, this is our server side. And last thing that we need to do is to implement the options. So var options equal to, as I said, the minimum 2 are our URI, which means our URL that we are calling, and basically we already constructed it. This is our path. The only thing is that in destinations there are a lot of things with spaces, so we will need to encode it to properly send to Google, and for that we can use standard encode URI and passing our path inside. And the second thing is to specify the method, and in our case we will go with get method, just like that. So those are our options that will be passed to request, and if everything will go right, we will get response with body. If everything will go wrong, we will get the response with error message. So we can save this server.js and basically restart our mock server. Then what we can do is we can uncomment in our application page in shadow.ts this calculation, save this page, and wait for our live reload server to apply all those changes. So let's take a look on our mock server. Okay, so we logged in inside, we got the shadow, and we also got the destinations. You see that we have requested paths constructed pretty well. We got all of those properties inside, except traffic model. It got undefined. We need to check what happened with the traffic model. But everything else seems to be fine. So we got the regions, we got destinations. Yeah, and the traffic model is wrong probably because of this E. Yeah, we'll need to take a look on it. But we anyway got the reply with a number of minutes that is needed. And now let's take a look on our traffic model. So here it should be traffic model without any E down there. And let's take a look on our provider. Yeah, it's traffic model. It was just not a typo. So we can start the mock server once again and just refresh the app. Yes, and we got the right traffic model and everything works. So basically, we just did the direct call using the MobieFirst Foundation client-side API to external resource, which is protected using the interceptor, and which is actually protected with the scope defined using our MobieFirst Foundation. And after granting access, after getting the right token, we were able to get the response from that resource. Basically, on this step, our lab number 270 is finished. Thank you.